My name is Camille. I am 30 years old, the founder of a small but successful interior architecture studio in San Francisco. I have spent over a decade clawing my way through one of the most competitive industries in the country. After 12 years of long nights, client rejections, and ramen dinners eaten over blueprints, I finally bought something for myself. Not a car, not jewelry. A vacation home in the Oregon mountains built exactly the way I'd always dreamed it would be. It was peaceful, quiet, a place to breathe. Until my sister Lila stayed there for one weekend and destroyed it. Not damaged, not made a mess. Destroyed. And when I called my parents in shock expecting outrage or at least concern, do you know what they said? "She's just young. You can afford it." That sentence snapped something inside me. What happened next did not just change my relationship with Lila. It changed the entire dynamic of my family. I did not yell. I did not threaten. I simply said, "I'll handle it." And when they received my formal invoice and a new family gathering policy attached, their faces went pale. They thought I was bluffing. They were wrong. I was born and raised in a modest suburb of Albuquerque, New Mexico. My parents, Kenneth and Miriam, were hard-working, honest people who valued stability above all else. My father taught high school art, and my mother worked as a bookkeeper for a small dental clinic. We never had much, but I never felt deprived. They taught me the importance of effort, of showing up, of doing things the right way, even when no one was watching. I was the first child, the responsible one, the helper, the straight A student who cleaned the kitchen without being asked. By the time I was 12, I had already internalized the idea that love was earned through usefulness. Then, when I was 13, my sister Lila was born. Everything shifted. I remember being thrilled to have a sister at first. I painted little signs for her nursery and picked out stuffed animals. But as Lila grew, it became painfully obvious that we were being raised under very different sets of rules. Where I had curfews and chores and expectations, Lila had excuses. Every tantrum was forgiven, every mistake overlooked. She was, as my mother often said, our little spark, someone not meant to be confined by rules. I left for college at 17, having earned a scholarship to a competitive design program in California. From that moment on, I was mostly on my own. I worked in cafes and took side jobs redesigning dorm rooms for extra cash. I made it through those years with grit and caffeine, not handouts. Lila, meanwhile, enjoyed a completely different upbringing. With only one child left at home and with more financial stability, my parents poured every resource into her. Dance classes, expensive tech gadgets, designer clothes. When she wrecked her first car at 17 because she was texting while driving, they bought her another one within 2 weeks. When she flunked out of community college, they told her school just wasn't her thing, and maybe she should focus on her social media marketing dreams instead. By the time Lila turned 23, she had cycled through 6 different jobs and 4 boyfriends and had yet to hold any position longer than 6 months. She still lived at home, and every setback was reframed by my parents as just part of her journey. They saw her as someone in bloom, not as someone refusing to grow up. Despite the resentment that had begun to build over the years, I tried to stay connected. I sent birthday gifts, flew home for holidays, even paid for Lila's online design course when she said she wanted to follow in my footsteps but couldn't afford the tuition. She never completed the first module. My parents constantly reminded me that I was the lucky one, the successful one, the one who didn't need help. And maybe they were right, but that didn't mean I deserved to be treated like a bank or a backup plan. When I bought the vacation home in Oregon, I thought maybe it could be a turning point, a space I could share selectively, a place to reset. I never imagined it would become the battlefield where decades of inequality would finally explode. My path into interior architecture was anything but glamorous. I graduated at the height of a recession when firms were closing their doors and design budgets were being slashed left and right. I took unpaid internships, worked double shifts, waiting tables, and rented a windowless room in the back of someone's converted garage just to make it through my first 2 years in San Francisco. I kept a digital portfolio updated constantly and applied to every project, no matter how small. I redesigned dental lobbies, daycare centers, even a friend's tiny coffee shop for just enough to cover my utilities that month. Eventually, I landed a mentorship with a well-respected architect who gave me my first major opportunity collaborating on the redesign of a boutique hotel lobby downtown. That project changed everything. It got featured in a local magazine, brought in clients who liked my minimalist, intuitive approach, and opened the door to steady freelance work. By 26, I registered my own LLC. By 28, I had a small but stable team of designers and contractors who trusted me. I still lived modestly rented my apartment, drove the same used hatchback I bought in college, and reinvested every cent into my business. I was cautious, methodical, and obsessed with not failing. Meanwhile, Lila was floating. That's the best word I can use, floating from one dream to the next, one identity to the other. One month, she wanted to launch a lifestyle blog. The next, she was training to become a yoga instructor, but dropped out halfway through the course because the early morning schedule wasn't aligned with her circadian rhythm. Our parents watched this unfold and insisted that it was all part of Lila's creative journey. I should be more patient, more supportive. You were always focused, my mom once said, but Lila is just different. She needs space to find herself. Every time she quit a job, they bought her books about self-discovery or helped her rebrand her Instagram. When she racked up credit card debt from an impromptu trip to Costa Rica with friends, my dad called it an investment in her life experiences. I tried not to judge, but it was exhausting. I had clawed my way up from zero, built something out of nothing, and watched as my sister lived like life was a soft cushion meant to catch her at every fall. She once borrowed my portable drafting tablet, something I used for client presentations, and returned it 2 months later with a cracked screen and said, "It's still usable though, right?" That was the dynamic. I provided. She consumed. And when I dared to express frustration, I was scolded for being rigid. "You don't know what it's like to be the younger sibling." Lila once told me, "Everyone always compares me to you." I wanted to say no one was asking her to become me. They were just asking her to become someone accountable. The real tipping point came when I purchased my vacation home. It had been a dream. Long deferred, something I visualized during the hardest nights of my early career. I scouted for a year, looking for the perfect spot, peaceful, secluded within driving distance of the bay, yet remote enough to feel like escape. When I finally found it, an A-frame nestled among evergreens with a creek running along the edge of the property, I knew. I poured months into the renovation, designed every corner myself. Every fixture, every fabric, every panel of reclaimed wood was chosen with intention. This was not a trophy. It was my sanctuary. My therapist at the time said the house represented something deeper, that in reclaiming peace for myself, I was trying to create the safety I never had growing up. Maybe that's true. I just know that when I first sat on the deck, coffee in hand, staring at the morning mist rising from the trees, I felt something I had not felt in years. Stillness. I never once thought that house would become a weapon in the ongoing war between who I was and what my family expected me to tolerate. The house sat quietly on the edge of a forest clearing in southern Oregon, surrounded by towering pines and the distant echo of a year-round creek that threaded through the rocks just past the back deck. It wasn't large, but it was perfect. A 2-story A-frame, sleek yet warm, with wood and glass as its primary language. From the outside, it looked like it had grown from the ground rather than been built. Inside, it was everything I had envisioned during the hardest nights of my 20s. The great room had floor-to-ceiling windows that bathed the space in natural light. The ceiling was lined with whitewashed cedar panels. The floors were matte-finished walnut that ran seamlessly from the kitchen to the living space. I had designed the furniture to match the environment, soft curves, linen upholstery, nothing loud or flashy. The kitchen was open with concrete countertops and hand-thrown ceramic tiles lining the backsplash in deep earth tones. I had installed floating shelves for simplicity and invested in high-end appliances not for show but because I genuinely loved to cook. Upstairs was the loft-style bedroom with a balcony that overlooked the creek. I placed a reading nook by the window, a soft leather armchair I had saved for years to buy, paired with a brass lamp that cast the perfect glow in the evenings. There was no television in the house, no Wi-Fi. It was a place for disconnection, for retreat. Every time I drove up, I brought fresh flowers, brewed tea, and watched the light shift across the wooden beams like a time-lapse painting. The back deck was my favorite part. I had designed a built-in bench that wrapped around a fire pit with cushions in soft gray and rust tones. I planted lavender and rosemary along the edges so the breeze would carry their scent. I even had a small canoe dock built at the creek's widest point. That house was not just a reward, it was a reclaiming of peace, of autonomy, of something no one had ever given me, but that I had fought for on my own terms. The only time I had hesitated about buying it was when I imagined what my family might say. Would they think I was showing off? Would Lila ask to borrow it the way she borrowed everything else? At first, I kept it quiet, only told a few friends, but eventually I showed my parents. They were impressed. My dad said it looked like a meditation center. My mom said it felt too quiet but congratulated me. Lila just laughed and said, "Wow, look at you. Must be nice to have that kind of money." I shrugged it off at the time. I told myself she didn't mean anything by it. But even then, deep down, I knew. That laugh was a warning, a glimpse of a boundary she did not recognize. It was mid-August when I got the call from my mother. I was wrapping up a client meeting when I saw her name flash on my phone. I let it go to voicemail but called her back during my drive home. Her voice was overly sweet, the kind of tone she always used when she was about to ask me for something I wouldn't like. She said Lila had been going through a rough patch. She had just broken up with her boyfriend, lost her latest job at a boutique, and was feeling fragile. Mom said she and her girlfriends were thinking of getting away for a weekend to clear their heads. They wanted to go somewhere quiet, maybe in nature. And then she said the words I had dreaded since the day I bought the property. I mentioned your cabin to her and she lit up. I immediately felt my stomach tighten. I told her I wasn't sure that was a good idea. My mom tried to soften it by saying, "Camille, the house is just sitting there empty most weekends. You've always said you wanted it to be a place of peace." Well, Lila could use a little peace right now. I reminded her calmly that Lila didn't exactly have a great track record with responsibility. I brought up the time she stayed at my apartment and left the front door open overnight, or when she borrowed my drafting tablet and returned it damaged. Mom brushed it off. She's matured a lot, and it's not just her. She's going with her friends from her yoga group. They're professional women. It'll just be 3 or 4 of them doing hikes, drinking tea, maybe journaling. For a while, I resisted, but then my dad got on the phone and added his own pressure. "You stayed on our couch for a few weeks when you were starting your business," he reminded me. "We didn't ask for anything. That's what family does." What he left out was that during those 3 weeks I paid for groceries cleaned and left the place better than I found it. Still, I could see I was going to lose this argument. So I said yes, but with conditions. I emailed Lila a list of house rules. Maximum of 4 people. No parties, no smoking, no overnight guests not pre-approved. Clean everything before leaving, and most importantly, any damage would be her responsibility. She replied with a "Thanks, sis. You're the best. We'll take such good care of it, promise." Something in me still hesitated, so I included before photos of each room and the outdoor space time-stamped and neatly labeled. I also gave her the contact for the local property manager just in case. The weekend arrived. I didn't hear much from her except for a text late Friday night that said, "Arrived safe. This place is magical." On Sunday, I received another message. "Leaving now. Had a beautiful time. Thank you so much again." That was it. No photos, no details, no phone call. I planned to drive up Tuesday to prep for a midweek team retreat with my staff. I figured I'd get there early, do a walkthrough, maybe restock some supplies. As I pulled onto the gravel road that led to the property, I noticed something immediately. Trash, beer cans, paper cups, plastic straws, strewn along the ditch like the aftermath of a concert. I stopped the car, got out, picked up a can. It was a cheap beer brand Lila liked. I felt the first ripple of panic. I drove the last quarter mile slowly, and as I approached the driveway, my chest began to tighten. My lavender bushes were trampled. One of the handmade wooden chairs I had placed by the fire pit was broken, lying in pieces. A half-burned pizza box was wedged beneath it. The garden hose was stretched across the driveway and split open. The front door was slightly ajar. My heart thudded. I pushed it open and a wave of stale alcohol and smoke hit me. The inside of the house looked like it had been ransacked. My custom linen sofa was stained with what looked like red wine. The oak coffee table I designed myself had a long burn mark across the top. The area rug was bunched and dirty. The kitchen was worse. My ceramic backsplash had cracks through 2 tiles. The fridge door was dented. Burnt food was stuck to the stovetop. 2 of the floating shelves had been ripped from the wall. Trash overflowed from the bin. Sticky rings stained the countertops. Upstairs, the reading nook was missing the armchair entirely. The lamp was smashed. In the bedroom, the bedding was gone. The mattress was half off the frame, soaked from what I assumed was rainwater. My carefully organized closets were emptied and disheveled. Towels were stuffed into drawers and covered in mud. In the bathroom, someone had vomited in the sink and left it there. The toilet paper holder was ripped off the wall. I could barely process it. I walked outside. The bench around the fire pit was singed, the cushions gone. Cigarette butts littered the deck. My canoe was nowhere in sight. I stood in the middle of my once safe space and felt an emotion I had not experienced in years. Betrayal. Not disappointment. Not irritation. Deep, cellular betrayal. I called Lila. She didn't answer. I called again. Nothing. I left a voicemail. Lila, call me immediately. This is serious. I didn't wait. I started taking photos of every room, every item, every piece of broken or burned or stained furniture. I documented everything. I texted my property manager. She hadn't been called all weekend. No issues reported. I sat down on the floor in the middle of the mess and felt the first sting of tears. Not because of the damage, because I knew exactly how this was going to go. I was going to be told to relax, to forgive, that it was just stuff, that family is more important, and I realized for the first time I was done playing that role. The next morning, after a mostly sleepless night spent cleaning just enough space to sit and think, I walked down the trail toward the creek, hoping for air and maybe a moment of clarity. That was when I saw Alice, my neighbor 2 cabins over, standing by her fence sipping coffee. Alice was in her 60s, retired, and lived up here full-time with her husband. We had spoken a few times mostly about gardening or which local contractor to avoid. She waved me over. I walked up bracing for awkward small talk, but instead she looked at me with something like sympathy. I wasn't sure if I should call you, she said, but I figured you'd want to know. She explained that Friday evening started quietly. A few cars pulled in around 5, seemed normal, but by 7 more cars arrived. By 8, the music started. Loud bass voices shouting the smell of smoke drifting through the trees. She counted at least 40 people, maybe more. Some had parked illegally along the narrow road. One group was lighting sparklers and throwing beer cans into the creek. Alice's husband, a former park ranger, had gone over and asked them to quiet down. They laughed. Someone yelled that it was a private party. At midnight, they started setting off fireworks. Alice called the county sheriff. Deputies showed up around 1:30 in the morning, issued a noise warning, and left. Things quieted for about half an hour. Then, it started again. Someone cranked the music louder, more shouting. Alice called again at 3 a.m., but no one came. "I'm so sorry, Camille," she said gently. "We've never had a problem here before. But your sister, she told people it was an open house party." I blinked. "What do you mean open house?" Alice nodded. She told my niece who showed up late that it was a weekend party at her rich sister's place. Said she rented it out for events now. Charged people $20 to come in. She was selling drinks from a cooler. My body went cold. This wasn't a spontaneous mess. This was intentional. Monetized. I thanked Alice and promised to follow up. Back at the house, I sat down and pulled up Lila's social media. There it was. A post from Friday afternoon, a selfie in front of my deck captioned, "Mountain Mansion Weekend Vibes. DM for address. $20 entry includes drinks and snacks." My jaw clenched. The comments were full of heart emojis, "can't wait," and "best idea ever." This wasn't negligence. This was exploitation. I called her again. No answer. I sent a single text. "We need to talk. Urgently." Then I started uploading my documentation photos, video timestamps into a shared cloud folder. I labeled every image by room and item. Then I called a local restoration service, a furniture repair specialist, and the marina to report the missing canoe. I didn't cry again. I didn't panic. I went into project mode. The damage would be assessed, the repairs estimated, and the costs documented. What hurt more than anything was not the physical wreckage. It was the certainty that Lila had looked at the home I built with care, love, and sacrifice, and saw it as an opportunity to throw a party she didn't pay for profit off strangers and lie to my face. I remembered our last call, her saying, "We'll take good care of it." Promise. The gall, the arrogance, the entitlement. I wasn't just furious. I was done. I emailed my attorney that afternoon, told her to be ready. I wasn't sure if I'd sue yet, but I wanted options. I called my insurance agent. She said damage from large, unauthorized gatherings might not be covered fully, especially since it had been permitted access, even if under false pretenses. That night, I slept in the guest room, the only area that hadn't been completely wrecked. I left my phone on silent. I needed space to think, not just about repairs, but about what this meant for my relationship with my family, and for what came next. I realized something in that quiet, untouched room. I had spent my entire adult life tolerating disrespect in the name of harmony. I had accepted less because I had more, and it was over. 2 days after returning to San Francisco, I called my parents and asked them to meet me at their house. I told them it was important and that Lila needed to be there too. My mother hesitated but agreed. That Thursday evening, I drove the familiar streets back to the house I grew up in, my thoughts rehearsing every possible version of the conversation ahead. When I walked in, my father was in his usual recliner flipping through a magazine. My mother sat on the edge of the couch looking tense, and Lila was curled in the corner with her phone in her hand, thumbs tapping furiously. She barely looked up when I entered. "Camille, honey, can I get you something to drink?" my mom asked with forced cheerfulness. "No, thanks," I said. "Let's get to it." I sat across from them, opened my laptop, and connected it to the television. "I want to show you something." For the next 15 minutes, I walked them through every room of the house, every photo, every burn mark, every broken chair. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't editorialize. I let the images speak. As the video ended, the silence in the room was thick. My mother's face had shifted from polite interest to something resembling concern. My father's lips were pressed into a tight line. Lila, however, glanced back down at her phone. I turned to her. "Would you like to explain what happened?" She shrugged. "It got out of hand. Some people showed up I didn't know. I couldn't control it." "You invited 50 people," I said calmly, "and you charged them." Her eyes widened just slightly. "I saw the posts. Alice told me. You turned my home into a party venue. You lied. It was just a few people at first. Then it grew. I didn't think it would matter." "It mattered," I said. My father cleared his throat. "Camille, I think you're being a bit harsh. Obviously, things got out of control, but Lila didn't intend to damage anything. Intent doesn't pay for the damage," I replied. "And it wasn't a minor mess. It's over $28,000 in repairs, not to mention the client retreat I had to cancel. Not to mention the fact that I now have to install a new security system, replace furniture, and file insurance reports because of your daughter's complete lack of respect." My mother jumped in. "I'm sure she feels terrible." "Don't you?" Sweetie Lila rolled her eyes. "Yeah, it sucks, but you're acting like I burned the place down. You're loaded, Camille. It's not like this bankrupts you." I stared at her, stunned. "This house isn't a plaything. It's something I worked my entire adult life to build. And even if I had $1 billion, that wouldn't give you the right to destroy my property." "God, you are always so dramatic," she snapped. "You were always the golden child. Perfect Camille with her perfect little house. Maybe this is why people don't want to hang out with you. You treat everything like a business transaction." I didn't flinch. "You're right. And this is a business transaction now." I brought an itemized invoice. I pulled out printed copies and passed them around. Every repair estimate, every replacement cost, total comes to $28,470. I expect that to be paid within 30 days. My dad's face turned red. "That's ridiculous. We're not going to let you bankrupt your sister." "You don't have to," I said. "She can arrange a payment plan, but I'm done absorbing the cost of her irresponsibility. That ends now." My mother looked at me with something between disbelief and disappointment. "You're really going to do this over money, no?" I replied. "Over boundaries, over respect, over the fact that I said no parties and she threw a concert, over the fact that I trusted her and she used me, and over the fact that neither of you seemed to think she should be held accountable." Lila stood up suddenly. "You know what, Fine? Do whatever you want. I don't care. Sue me. I can't pay you anyway." She stormed out of the room. My parents sat in silence. I packed up my things. "You'll receive the invoice by email tonight. I'm also instituting a new family property policy. No one uses my homes without a signed agreement, a damage deposit, and written approval. That includes both of you. You're punishing all of us," my father said. "No, I'm protecting myself." I left without another word. That night, back at my apartment in San Francisco, I finalized the email. It included the formal invoice, an offer for a structured payment plan, and an attachment titled Family Property Usage Policy. The tone was professional. No emotion, no blame. Just facts. I reviewed it 3 times before sending it to Lila and CCing both of my parents. Within 30 minutes, my phone began buzzing with calls and texts. I didn't answer. I had said everything I needed to. The next morning, I sat down with my attorney, a friend from grad school named Simone. I explained the situation. She looked through the photos, the documentation, and the invoice. "You're completely within your rights," she said. "You gave her access under specific terms. She violated them. If she refuses to pay, you can take her to small claims court and win easily. But—" She paused. "But be ready for the emotional fallout. Families don't always respond well to legal boundaries." I nodded. "It's already happened." Simone offered to draft a demand letter if the invoice was ignored. In the meantime, I posted a notice on my studio's intranet board canceling the retreat and explaining that the house had suffered unexpected damage. I didn't mention who caused it. My employees didn't need to know. The next week was quiet. Too quiet. No one responded to the email. No acknowledgement. No apology. Nothing. Then, on the 7th day, I saw that Lila had posted a dramatic Instagram story about how her cold-hearted sister was trying to bankrupt her over a few wine stains. She included photos of us as kids and wrote about how money changes people. The comments were exactly what you'd expect. Friends telling her I was evil, that I should be supporting her, not punishing her, that sisters are supposed to be there for each other. I didn't respond. I simply saved the post in case I needed it later. I sent a second email. This time I reiterated the deadline and offered to set up a call to discuss payment terms. I also clarified that refusal to respond would be interpreted as rejection of the offer and that I would pursue legal options. Then I began drafting the formal family policy. It included 6 rules. All stays must be approved in writing with specific dates and guest lists. A refundable deposit of $1,000 is required before entry. A pre-visit and post-visit walkthrough must be documented with photos or video. All guests must sign an agreement of responsibility. Violations will result in permanent revocation of access. No exceptions. I printed the document, signed it, and saved it in both digital and hard copy formats. I sent another message to my parents stating that the policy now applied to them as well. My father called almost immediately. "You're blowing this out of proportion," he said. "It was a mistake. She didn't mean for it to get out of hand." "Dad," I replied, "she charged people money. She turned my private home into a venue. That's not a mistake. That's a business, and she's not paying for what she broke." "You're acting like some lawyer." "No," I said calmly. "I'm acting like someone who finally values herself enough to stop letting her family take advantage of her." He hung up without another word. The silence didn't last. 2 days later, the emotional backlash arrived in full force. My aunt called, clearly having heard the story from my mother. She said she was worried about the family falling apart over money and that Lila's young, she just made a bad call. I asked if she had seen the photos. She hadn't. I sent them. She never called back. My grandmother left a voicemail, her voice shaky with age and disapproval. "Camille, darling, I don't understand what's happening, but I hope you remember that family is all we have. Let this go, sweetheart." I didn't respond. Friends of Lila's began posting on social media, some vague, some direct. "Crazy how people change when they get money," one said. "Some folks forget who supported them when they had nothing," said another. I had never accepted a cent from anyone in my family. Still, I didn't defend myself publicly. I didn't need to. But privately, the weight began to build. For the first time in years, I felt like the outsider again, the responsible one, the one who didn't get it. My parents stopped replying to emails. My father ignored a follow-up message asking for acknowledgement of the invoice. My mother sent a single text, "This is not the daughter we raised." I reread that line a dozen times, not out of guilt, but out of clarity. She was right. I was no longer the daughter who swallowed disrespect for the sake of peace. I had changed. I wasn't the one who bent anymore. Lila, meanwhile, had taken her narrative to Facebook, writing a long post that painted me as a cruel perfectionist who cared more about furniture than family. She mentioned our childhood, my successes, how she always lived in my shadow, how I was punishing her for being different. What she didn't mention was the money she made charging strangers to party in a home she didn't own, or the destruction she left behind, or the fact that she still hadn't picked up the phone. I let her talk. Let her spin her story. I knew what mattered. My truth didn't need a post. It had receipts. In the meantime, I focused on the restoration. I worked with contractors, picked out new materials, scheduled deep cleaning services. Slowly, my sanctuary began to look like itself again. But it no longer felt the same. Something had shifted. The space held a memory now, not of peace, but of betrayal. And I realized that the only way to truly reclaim it was to finish what I started. I printed the court filing documents, I signed them, and I dropped them in the mailbox. It wasn't about punishment, it was about boundaries and accountability, and the simple truth that no one, not even your sister, has the right to wreck your world and walk away laughing. 3 days after I filed the court documents, my father called. His voice sounded different, tired. No trace of anger or defiance, just quiet resignation. He asked if they could come visit me in San Francisco. I agreed. When they arrived, I met them at my apartment where the tension hung like a dense fog. We didn't talk much over lunch, small talk about traffic and the weather. But once we returned to my place and sat down, my mother was the first to speak. We saw the full estimates. We called the contractors ourselves. Her voice trembled slightly. We didn't know it was that bad. My father added, "We spoke to Alice. She confirmed everything, and we saw Lila's post. It was eye-opening." I waited. They looked at each other, unsure who would say the next part. My mother took a breath. "Camille, we owe you an apology. A real one. Not the kind that's followed by an excuse." My father nodded. "We enabled her, for years. And we didn't want to admit that. It was easier to call you harsh than to face what we let happen." I stayed silent, letting their words settle. "We're going to cover the cost," he continued. "All of it. We spoke to our financial advisor. It'll take some rearranging, but it's only fair." My mother added, "We've also told Lila she has to pay us back, monthly, with consequences if she defaults. She's not happy, but we're standing firm." I finally spoke. "Thank you. That means more than you know, but this isn't just about money. It's about respect. It's about not being treated like the adult who always cleans up the mess." My mother reached across the coffee table. "We see that now. We really do." We sat in silence for a moment, not out of discomfort, but because something unspoken had shifted, something long overdue. "We'd like to see the house," my father said. "Not to judge, just to understand." "Of course," I replied. "But you'll need to sign the family policy first." He smiled faintly. "Fair enough." That night, as they settled into my guest room, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. The next morning, we drove up to the cabin together. The road looked cleaner. Alice had kindly collected the trash along her property line and even left a note on my porch welcoming me back. My parents were quiet during the drive. As we pulled into the driveway, my mother gasped softly. The garden had been replanted. The lavender was starting to bloom again. The fire pit had new stones and fresh cushions. Inside, the smell of cleaning products and wood polish replaced the staleness of beer and smoke. My father walked slowly through each room, taking in the repaired kitchen tile, the new light fixture, the replaced reading chair. My mother lingered near the great room windows, staring at the trees as if seeing them for the first time. I explained what had been replaced, what had been salvaged, and what was gone for good. My father touched the edge of the new coffee table and whispered, "I had no idea." "Most people don't," I said, "not unless they build something themselves." My mother turned to me. "This place? It's more than a house, isn't it? It's who I became when no one was watching," I said. We spent the rest of the afternoon outside. No one mentioned Lila. No one brought up the invoice or the court case. For once, it wasn't about blame or justification. It was about understanding. When the sun began to set, casting golden light across the creek, my mother sat beside me and said, "We failed her, but we also failed you, and I hope it's not too late to start doing better." I nodded. It's not too late. But it has to be real this time. My father nodded in agreement. "We'll follow your rules from now on. All of them. Because they're not about control. They're about respect." I didn't cry. But for the first time since the party, I exhaled fully. 6 months later, the cabin was fully restored. I had hosted a small retreat for my design team, then a quiet weekend with a close friend from college. Everyone followed the property policy, signed the forms, paid the deposit, and treated the space with care. And something amazing happened. I stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop. My parents kept their word. They paid every cent of the invoice. They also enforced their repayment plan with Lila. According to my mother, there were tears shouting even threats to move out. But eventually, Lila started paying them back. Slowly, begrudgingly. But it was a start. Then, one day in early December, I received an email from her. The subject line simply read, "I'm sorry." The message was short. She acknowledged the damage, admitted she lied, said the process of paying our parents back had forced her to take a long, hard look at herself. She said she didn't expect forgiveness. She just wanted me to know she was trying. I waited 2 days before replying. I told her that actions speak louder than words, that I hoped she kept trying, that I wasn't ready for a conversation, but I appreciated the message. She responded with a single sentence. "Thank you for giving me the chance to do better." As I sat on the rebuilt deck one cool spring morning, coffee in hand, birdsong in the air, I realized something. This wasn't just about a party. It was about a pattern, a story my family had lived in for decades, one where responsibility was invisible and boundaries were treated as cruelty. I had broken that pattern, not by yelling, not by pleading, but by standing firm. And the result wasn't destruction. It was change. Imperfect, delayed, messy change. But change nonetheless. So if you're reading this and you've been told to forgive and forget to let it go because you can afford it, remember this. Real love includes accountability. Real respect requires boundaries, and sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no and mean it. Have you ever had to draw a line with someone you love? What happened when you finally stood your ground?